What's up, everybody? Evan here for Grips.com, continuing with Project Get Me Stacking. Today's question is going to be a little bit about self-improvement and some things you can do to develop your own game, develop your own skills, and develop your own win rate without needing the help of a coach. But a coach can help. It's about reviewing sessions. So if you don't have Hold a Manager or Poker Tracker, you won't really be able to do this as well. But you can still do it. Save hand histories. Anyway, I'll get straight into it. Hi, Evan. First of all, great videos. I really like to listen to your suggestions and tips, and it really helps me to focus on the core of playing poker, making good decisions, whether losing or winning in one specific session. Someone's been watching and someone's been learning. So thank you for that. My question is, how are you reviewing your sessions? I know that this is really important, but I'm really struggling with what hands I should pick, what spots to look for, or how many hands I should look at. Most often I am just looking at the biggest pots, but I know that this isn't all. So it would be great to have some insight into your reviewing process. Thanks, Yannick. And like a lot of things in poker and in life, this is something that gets better with practice. At first, you may think that almost every spot you have in your poker sessions and in the games you play is a difficult one. But the more you review and the more you watch video and get into spots and think about different situations, the more standard some spots will seem and the less attention they will require. Basically, the most important hands to look at are A, the ones where something out of the ordinary happened, B, when you got into a spot where you didn't know what to do because you want to figure out what to do so the next time you're in that spot you can make the right play. And that's really it. The size of the pot isn't really important at all. And most of the time the biggest pots are coolers, which don't really require much review. So let's get into how you can do an effective study session. Looking at biggest pots, it's classic. We assume that those are the pots that make the difference since they have the biggest impact on our results of the day. But since we know it's about making the decision, the best decision, regardless of whether we're winning or losing, and that it's not just about the dollar amount in each hand, we can recognize that it's about finding the small errors that you must eliminate before they add up over time and really hurt your win rate. So let's talk about how to review your sessions. The most important thing is to note hands that you're confused about during the session. If you wait until after the session and look back and try to find the hands where you were having difficulty or struggling, you're going to forget about a lot of situations that you got into because, maybe it was a really not so significant pot. Maybe it was just like pre-flop raise spot, a pre-flop 3-bet pot. Whether or not you want to float a flop. It's a pot that only amounted to a few big blinds. So when looking back, compared to all the other pots played, it's going to seem like an insignificant hand. So the most important thing to do is to plan your review before you get to the review stage. And that means make notes during the session. Okay, when I had ace-7 offsuit, that was a tough spot. Write down ace-7. And then when you go to look at your Hold a Manager later, you can look for ace-7 and you'll find that specific hand. And then you can really analyze it. For those of you that don't have Hold a Manager or Poker Tracker, when you get into a tough spot, save the hand history. Just open the hand history, copy paste it into a text document, and then at the end of the session you can look at that hand again. Don't look at it during the session because you'll just get more confused and you might tilt a little bit. But as long as you have it there to review after, you'll be focusing on the right situations, the ones that you had difficulty with that you want to fix. Number 2. When your opponents do something that you don't do, you want to try to figure out why they did that and whether or not it was a good idea or a bad idea. If you realize that, let's say a winning player who's really crushing does a lot of things that you don't do, and you spot him doing all these different things, note down those hands. Just because you aren't the one involved in a situation doesn't mean it's not a hand worth reviewing. You want to see what cool plays your opponents are doing that are working, that are making them money, and then try to understand why they're doing those plays and see if you can incorporate them into your game somehow. Likewise, if you can identify when your opponents are doing stuff you wouldn't do that is poor, you can make a note of that and exploit them for doing that at a later stage in the session, or maybe the next session, or just whenever you get into that spot with them. So on top of making notes about hands that you struggle with, make notes about your opponent's hands where you just didn't really get it off the top of your head. And in the moment you might not get it, but when you look at it and just stare at it later and really think about it, you'll probably figure out why they did what they did and whether or not it was a good thing. A great option is to take a recording software like a Camtasia, or I know that Apple computers have a screen recording tool where you can just record your session and then watch it at a later date. You don't want to watch it right after, because you're still just going to be in a zone. You want to watch it a day later or maybe a week later, where you can be totally objective about your play and see if, looking back, you would have made the same plays, or if you can justify why you made the plays you made. It's also a lot easier to spot some bonehead plays and some big mistakes when you're not in the moment, really tied to the decisions. Like if you had a losing session, you aren't going to want to identify where you fucked up necessarily, because it hurts even more. But if you wait a couple days or you wait a week and then look back, then it's a lot easier to be objective, and you can just be totally honest with yourself about your play and identify where you're doing stuff that makes sense and where you're doing stuff that doesn't make sense. So there are a lot of techniques you can do beyond just looking at hand histories in Hold'em Manager and Poker Tracker to really get the most out of your review. Number 4 is taking the objectivity to the next level. It's just have someone else watch you play. It's a lot easier for someone to point out your mistakes than it is for you to point out your own mistakes, because again, there's a little bit of a pride thing there. We don't want to admit when we're wrong, and we think that our way is the right way. But someone who is completely objective, who knows their stuff, can be honest with you. And I know that some people play differently when people are watching them, so having a live sweat session isn't necessarily the best option. But an easy thing to do is, number 3, record your session, and then number 4, have someone else watch that session and get them to give you their thoughts on what they think about your play and where you could have done something different or where you did something great. And the more you do that, the more you'll really find things working out for you. Number 5, once you have a large sample of hands and you have a good database you're working with, that's when you can really start to get into the nitty-gritty, isolating situations and hands to see if you are playing certain things profitably or unprofitably. 1 through 4, it's very important. This is the stuff that you want to be doing. Number 1 and number 2, you pretty much want to be doing daily if you're playing poker daily. 3 and 4, that's something you want to do at least once a week. Maybe twice a week. For number 4, since it can be tough to get someone else to commit some time to watch you play, unless you maybe do a trade, I'll watch you and you watch me, which is even better. Maybe you do that one once every 2 weeks, but you review your own sessions once a week, and once every 2 weeks you get someone else to watch and comment, unless you can handle them doing it more. And number 5 is something you probably want to do maybe once a month, maybe even once every 6 months, depending on how much you're playing, because you need a lot of volume for the numbers and the situations to really mean anything in Hold'em Manager. But what you can do once you have that large sample is really start to isolate specific situations to see if you are making or breaking yourself. First is with specific hands. Set the filter. Say I want to know if I make money with pocket 9s. Bam. You can set a filter that says with pocket 9s. Then you can say I want to know if I make money with ace jack when I'm out of position, or if I make money with ace jack when I'm in position, if I make money with ace queen when I've called a 3-bet, when I 4-bet, how am I doing? When I 4-bet with specific hands, how am I doing? And you can break it down to get into really specific situations. So you start general, first just pick some hands, see how you're doing with your pair, see how you do with your suited connectors. Do you make more money with 9-10 suited than you do with 5-4 suited? You probably do. Try to figure out why. Then take it to the next level. How am I doing in each position? Cutoff, button, small blind, big blind. And remember, you're expected to lose money in the blinds. The goal is just to lose not that much. So if you see that you're winning in all positions and you're losing money in the blinds, that's normal. That makes sense. Don't be surprised by that. And then you can combine positions with hands and see how you do with your premiums in position versus out of position. Then you get into the situational stuff. And finally, always, if you're playing against the same player pool a lot, see how you're doing against specific opponents and see how those other opponents are doing overall. Because if someone's really crushing you, you want to figure out what they're doing that crushes you, what hole you have in your game that they're exploiting, how they're exploiting it. See if you can counter that, and even if you can't, you can probably use that same technique that they do against other players who play a similar style to you and start exploiting them and making that bank from them. So you can also put them all together. You can do all sorts of crazy. I want to know how I do it in 3-bet pots as the 3-bet caller against this specific player when I'm out of position. And you can just break down all those situations. And there are going to be some situations where you're probably losing money, like when you're playing out of the blinds, or I don't know, when you get 4-bet maybe. But as long as they are situations where your opponents would be losing as well, then that's fine. And if there are situations where you see you're losing but your opponents are making money, try to figure out why. So reviewing sessions, it's about so much more than just looking at hands, the biggest pots you play and the hands that you had difficulty with. There's so much more you can get when you do reviews, especially with these awesome tracking softwares that collect so much data. So that's what you got to do. I know it's a lot of stuff to do, and it's easy to say it, and it's a lot harder to do it. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the better you will get at it. And eventually, it'll just become second nature. But you have your list of 5 things you can do to review your sessions. And just remember, the review starts during the session. You don't wait till after to start doing your review. During your session, you're actively saying, I had trouble here. I wonder about that spot. I want to figure out more about that. Why did he do that? Did it work? And then you'll be ready to do your review, and you'll get the most out of your review and be efficient with your time rather than sitting there being like, ugh, which hand? Oh yeah, that was a cool pot. Oh, big one, fun, you know? Because the size of the pot doesn't matter. It's whether or not you made the right decision. Was it a clear decision? Was it a close decision? If it's a close decision, it's not always a huge deal which way you go. But in clear spots, if you're doing something different than the norm, you probably want to reevaluate why. And lastly, if you don't have someone who can watch you play, someone from the community will probably be down. Join our Grips Skype group. I'm sure you can get a sweater. And people are happy to trade sweating for sweating. Like the best way to improve is to watch other people play and have them watch you play. And if you can find a study buddy to do that with, or multiple, you are going to improve your game in leaps and bounds so fast. You'll be amazed. So that's gonna wrap it up for my thoughts on that. Please leave your comments below. Also, if you have techniques that you use to review your sessions that I didn't mention, please mention them so that we can all start implementing them and improve our review process. Maybe I need to review my review process. I'm kind of lazy. I waste some time on my session reviews. I'm not gonna lie. I should take my own advice here. If you have any questions for the project, please send them to evan@grips.com with the subject line "Get Me Stackin'." Hopefully I can answer your question and help you get stacking. And finally, if you're finding these videos helpful, they're improving your game, you're seeing results, you want to get more, please show your support and subscribe to the channel below. And that's going to do it for me. As always, I hope you found the video insightful and informative. This has been Evan for Grips.com. Saying peace.